Hi, everyone. I'm here with another conversation with another cool guest. Joining me today, my teammate will be Steve Cutler, who I actually met. What was that, Steve? About a month ago or 2 months ago. We
Yeah, this has
gave,
been very recent. Yeah.
yeah, we both gave a talk at the Filipino CEO Circle. I didn't even know such an organization existed. It was really both, I would say, surprising, but in a way comforting that there's a group of these high-powered Filipino women and they're getting together and they're making things happen. I talked about AI, obviously, but Stephen also came in with cybersecurity. So anyway, I'll pass the mic to Steve. Hey, Steve, how are you doing? And maybe share a little bit about yourself to the audience.
Well, I'm starting to dry out. It's nice that we actually have a day where it looks like there's some sunshine. The rain seems to have stopped for a little while, so it's actually very nice and kind of a I'm loving life kind of thing right now. So
Awesome.
I'll be able to get out later today and so on. Well, Doc, it was really exciting to meet you also at that Filipina CEO gathering. And I felt the same way that you did. I had never heard about that organization before until they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we'd like for you to come over and talk." To know that there was, I mean, it was a room full of these women. Um, Most of them were not real young, of course, but to know that there were that many women in charge of really high-powered organizations was really heartening to me, and I really felt good about that. It was good to see the energy in that room, and how it can continue to build the nation. Well, I've been in the
Yeah.
Philippines for about 20 years or so, and which is makes it even more amazing that this is the first time I'd heard about that organization, and much less speak before it. Prior to my uh, time here in the Philippines, well, and even 5 years of that, I was a career FBI, U.S. FBI agent. In the last 5 years of my career, I headed the FBI's office at the U.S. Embassy here in the Philippines. And in those days, the early 2000s, the FBI's focus, as much of the Philippine focus, was on terrorist issues throughout the nation, whether that was FSIF, uh, BIFF was just starting in those days. We still had the uh, number of other terrorist organizations. We had just come off of some interesting cybersecurity issues with the I Love You virus just a couple of years before. And so, as the head of the FBI's office, we were doing a lot of work in a lot of different areas with the National Bureau of Investigation, the Philippine National Police, uh, Bureau of Immigration, also all sorts of people. And it was a really exciting time. And it still is an exciting time in many ways. The Philippine National Police and the National Bureau of Investigation were just starting their cybersecurity uh, and their cyber crime investigations. The law that we had at that time wasn't really addressing cyber crimes very well because it was a very new concept. That has evolved over time and continues to evolve. And one of the things that lesson, or that the lesson that I got out of that was the legal arena is very detailed, we think of it as being set in stone, but it's the stone that it's set in is sort of like sandstone in the sense that it does evolve over time. It evolved uh, sometimes not as quickly as we would want, and in ways that we may not really want it. But the law does evolve, and one of the things that was critical, in my view, is the importance of professional organizations and just people making sure that they're trying to express to their legislators and those who interpret the law how they want to see things move forward. And so the night that we spoke to the Filipina CEO group, your talk kind of opened my eyes to a number of things. Then I've continued to do some research into this, and that is in the AI. And I've come to realize that AI is most of us think of it as artificial intelligence, and that's one aspect of it. But I've come to see that it's also assisted intelligence and augmented intelligence as well. And so the use of the initials AI actually opens up an incredibly broad field for us. Earlier this morning, or some time ago now, by an article where a legislator in the United States was using AI to help draft legislation. And at first I was upset about that. And I thought, well, that's not a good use of AI. You know, this is what you get paid for. This is what your staff gets paid for. And then I settled down and I kind of looked at it and I thought, well, you know, this is actually, if it's done well, uh, could be a good way of using this augmented or artificial intelligence. And here's why I think that. Because one of the things that it does, if AI is prepped well, if it's coached well and put together well, it has the capacity to bring together things that we as people, you know, we all have a million things going on in our lives, and especially those people, the staff for legislators and legislators themselves. We have a million things going on. We, and our minds are only have so much capacity, even the best of minds. And AI has the capacity to put some things together, not in the final form, but a uh, as a draft. Say, for example, the first draft. And there may be ideas in this legislation, in this court filing, in this charging document, or whatever that I hadn't thought about. I had an interesting meeting last night where I could have used some AI because after the meeting, I thought, oh, why didn't I say that? I wish I had said that. And that's where AI might have actually helped me make an even better point. We were talking about government subsidies and so on. And it wasn't until I was on the way home that I thought, well, why didn't I mention, you know, there's already a potential subsidy program available. We're just not using it because nobody thought about it. Oh, man. And I think AI could have helped me a little bit in those positions.
Yeah, if I can
Please.
just interject. You bring up a lot of good points, Stephen. Especially around. Well, let's talk more about the law in a bit. But a lot of people I meet always have this default assumption that it's going to be man versus machine or humans versus AI. And the real practical use cases are humans augmented by AI, or
Yeah.
AI taking the lead, and humans setting parameters. That's really where the action is. But the Hollywood version of it, the stuff you see in the news, is either humans need to, like, there's this writers strike, this actors guild strike. Obviously they have reasons, but it seems to all be premised on the thought that machines and AI will replace us. And just exactly as you said, humans make mistakes, we forget things, and that's not to say that you're not allowed to make mistakes, but that's actually where the AI augmentation can help a lot, because AI will remember everything you tell it to remember. And it's nice to just have this virtual assistant everywhere you go, helping you organize your thoughts. So what do you think about that? Or and
Well,
come back
yeah,
to
I
your
was thinking,
story.
well, for example, with the movies, we're already using, not we, I shouldn't say we, I'm not involved in the movies, but the movie makers are already using a kind of AI with the computer generated stunts, backgrounds, whatever. Again, as long as they're done well, they add to the story. And we can, I know, I've seen videos of like the latest Tom Cruise movie. He's got this, he rides a motorcycle down a ramp and then jumps off. Well, those are incredibly dangerous stunts. There are a lot of things in today's movies that are really incredibly dangerous for stunt actors as well as the main actors themselves. Why does I mean it's cool. I like the fact that I know that Tom Cruise spends hours in the gym and that he spends hours, perfecting this particular stunt. But is it really worth the risk for my enjoyment of a movie? And would it work just as well? Um, these days, I think they can do quite well. And what I think that Hollywood folks need to do is to figure out how we can incorporate the creativity of the augmentation and still make it work for the story. There's a number of other areas in what I'll call the security field that I'm thinking about. I don't know how familiar you and your viewers are with the system that they have in India called Aadhaar, which involves a lot of facial recognition and other things. And the idea about Aadhaar was that I should be able to get on a bus and either put my finger on a keypad or my facial recognition or whatever, and I don't actually have to put coins in a little drop box on the bus or have somebody come down the aisle and collect. Um, it just kind of gets debited to an account that I have at the bank. And traditionally, we've really not liked facial recognition. And why is that? Well, because up until relatively recently, facial recognition was developed and built in Western Europe and North America. The skin tones are different there. Um, the types of people, with hair, with nose structures, the contrast of skin tones, and so on. And so the AI of facial recognition did not do well against a significant portion of the world's population because India is now using facial recognition in a very strong way. The AI is able to look at a billion different kinds of, literally billion different kinds of skin tone and has learned how to differentiate the various areas of contrast and so on. Now, what that has allowed us to do is to make facial recognition tremendously more useful to us, tremendously more useful. I still don't think I like facial recognition very well, but the idea is that it has helped the AI of facial recognition to learn vastly better. The downside to it is that any of these things can still be, if we rely solely on technology, it can still be what I'll call tricked. There may still be ways of getting past facial recognition. I'll talk in a couple of minutes about the AI that I really like, which is voice recognition, and it can be tricked. Now, the interesting thing about this is in a one-off event, we can show that the AI can be fooled or it can be tricked. What I have not yet seen is how we can fool something like Aadhaar at scale. So you and I, as individuals, might be able to have a one-time theft of money from somebody else's property because we hold a piece of paper up and it's like a picture of the guy and we move it or something and the AI is tricked. But can we do that at scale to where we're able to take millions of dollars or affect millions of accounts? And that's where I just don't think we can. Not to say it can't be done, but it's going to be much more difficult to do that at scale. Taking the idea of Aadhaar and this building of AI and training it and teaching it, one of the things that I'm particularly excited about in the recognition field is voice recognition. A lot of people will tell me that, well, look, I have personal experience. I've called my I've called my home. I've got twin daughters, and I can't tell their voices apart all the time. Well, that's the human ear. With the AI that's attached to voice recognition, it gets a lot more complex than what my ear can do. I'm told that for at least one of the companies that does facial recognition, excuse me, voice recognition, this is
Wait,
voice recognition, that their AI looks at like 600 different points on a voice. And that's difficult to
are like markers on the audio. Is that how it
different
works?
markers. That's exactly right. So, and here's what I have come to learn. So, even the way your voice here may be able to imitate my voice, or I can imitate your voice. But what the AI picks out is even the way, and this is significant, even the way your lips move in relationship with your front teeth. So the fact that your teeth are at a different angle than what mine are, our tongue, I don't know how deep I want to go on this, but there are glottal sounds, which comes from the back of the throat, uh, sounds that are made with the palate, even things like if you've heard um, a lot of people make what is kind of a D sound instead of a TH sound. It is, I'm going to the mall instead of the mall. This pronunciation was learned as a young child, and what it requires is to make the D sound, your tongue actually touches the palate further back. With the TH sound, your tongue kind of gets in between the front teeth, and that makes the sound, or this instead of this. This touches the palate just behind the top teeth, the D sound. And it's like just millimeters and sometimes just centimeters apart, but it's enough to make the sound. And that's what the AI can focus on, the way the teeth actually interact with the tongue and the lips. And it's just like, it's mind boggling. And that's the key. It's mind boggling. And that's where the AI can actually help us. What that leads us to is, when you think about this, for access into an area, for access to your bank accounts, what if instead of, or in addition to, uh, getting into your bank account, you call up the app on your phone and you could enter a password. But then there's a secondary check. You have to say something into your phone. The AI can be taught to ignore background noises, whether you are in a rice field and you're a rice planter, or a stockman, you're dealing with a bunch of cattle or a bunch of chickens and or geese and ducks that are making a lot of noise all the time. There's a lot of things that are confusing to our ear. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. The signal's choppy. The AI can actually work their way through all of that and focus just on your voice. And then it begins to pick up whether you are raising your voice because you're angry, you're whispering because your spouse is asleep and you want to do something with your bank account while he or she is asleep. The AI can still pick up with that, and you would be able to do your banking transaction or your financial transaction. You buy stock, bonds, whatever you want to do, come to finance it. It opens up some really, really interesting ideas in um, the legal field also, I think this AI offers us a number of opportunities to verify identification in ways that we have not done before, and do it remotely. So say, for example, if you and I were lawyers and we were conducting a negotiation, in the old days, I'd have you come into my office, we would sit down at the desk, you'd have to take an hour to 2 hours, especially in some areas of Metro Manila, or to even to fly here from, Indonesia or Singapore or whatever. We would have to take a lot of time. We would do some negotiation, and then finally come to a some kind of agreement. What AI might allow us to do is to draft our documents, our very detailed contracts and so on, in a draft form. And then I, as a human lawyer, would simply do that. The AI becomes like a junior associate, or a paralegal, in the sense that it drafts things, and then I, as the lawyer, or I, as a paralegal, junior associate, I make sure that that is good, that all the commas are in the right place, that the paragraphs are properly aligned, everything is proper. And then I would give it to a senior partner for a final review and presentation to a client. I don't see AI, you mentioned this earlier, I don't see AI replacing humans. I see the paralegals, junior associates, and so on, still being very necessary, but their gritty work is going to be reduced, and they will be allowed to actually do much more creative work, I think, in the future. That's my view on it. And it's going to actually make them a better resource for the law firms. Same thing for doctors. I was a friend of mine in another country was diagnosed with a disease. I'd never heard of this thing before, and it made me think. I'm not a doctor, but I've been around long enough that I've heard of a lot of diseases. And when I heard about this disease, it was a skin issue.
If I can just chime in here,
Yeah, please.
I don't know how you feel about this, but I think AI is on the verge. And I hope I don't end up eating my words later, but it's on the verge of redefining what expertise means, because the fact that on its own, the models pretty much know, especially generative AI, they pretty much know a lot about many things. They were trained on medical text, legal
Mm-hmm.
texts, etc. To the point that it's kind of the more mundane inquiries that you might have, where, for example, you wanted to know a little bit about, let's say, a particular medicine, or a little bit about the law on this, without having to consult an actual doctor or lawyer, you could probably get by just with the AI. Now, I think where it gets tricky is when people start offering professional or semi-professional advice with the help of AI. I think that's the gray area. People are kind of, sensitive about that. Like I saw, for example, the other day, there's this company that's offering marketing classes powered by AI, and their spiel was you can now fire your marketing agency and just use AI to
Oh,
do
no, no,
all
no,
of the
no.
work that they used to do. So I don't know, how do you feel about that?
I I look at AI and all of the issues is that before we act on it, our humanness, our humanity needs to step in, and it needs to be part of the process. Uh, don't just blindly sign off on things. I would not do that even if a human wrote a document if I have to sign off on it, I'm going to have, I'm going to do some kind of review.
Hmm.
And I think in much the same way as, oh, well, I looked it up on Google, even these days, which, you know, during the COVID lockdowns, we all became much more expertise or had much more expertise in Google. And Google is kind of an AI kind of thing because it does searches for me. It gives me a lot of different things that I don't have to actually go to the library and look up. But it gives me a lot of things, but then I have to read it and say, well, that doesn't really make sense in light of everything else I've read, or that does make sense in light of everything else I've read. Oh, this is this, this is that, or I'll toss this out. I don't believe that. Uh, my critical thinking skills are still incredibly important. Your critical thinking skills, which brings up how we do the education system. And that's something that I think the Philippines really needs to focus on as uh, the IT industry, the business processing industry within the Philippines evolves uh, into the future. I think the Philippine, whether it's contact centers or the business processing, the back office type stuff, we have a tremendous opportunity here. We see that Filipinos, as a nation, are incredibly clever, are incredibly quick minded uh, if they're given the right opportunities and the right education to hone those skills. Unfortunately, I don't think that we're doing that really, really well right now. I think we're doing well, but not as well as we need to. And so our schools in the past and even to today are much more, maybe not quite as focused on rote or memorization as Japan is, but we still go, I think, too far that direction. I think what we
Hmm.
need is to figure out a good middle ground between rote memorization because we do need bits of information about dates and things happening and trends and so on. Combine that though and find ways to improve and sharpen the critical thinking skills of our people. And I think that's one of those areas where we're not really doing real well on right now. And I look at an area that I have a real weakness in, which is mathematics.
Hmm.
I hear a lot of people talk about, well, look, you're never going to use differential equations, unless you're like some kind of rocket scientist or something. Well, yeah, okay. I mean, I can't remember a time I've ever used differential equations in my work life, but that's not really the point. The point is training your mind to think, to be able to think logically, to think, and learning about not just arithmetic, but learning algebra, learning geometry, learning even up into trigonometry
Hmm.
helps to train your mind in ways of thinking how to put things in a way that we can all understand. I would suggest that also about different languages. And I think the Philippines, as a group, the Philippines is much better prepared in languages than many countries are. For
Mm.
example, in
Yeah.
the United States, I grew up with English. And so, to the extent that I know English, it's native to me. I did not start learning a second language until I was 14.
Right.
And that really put me behind the learning curve because as, for example, in Spanish, when we roll R's, I'm sorry, my tongue doesn't work that way. When we do in Russian and German, there are some sounds that kind of come from the back of the throat. Arabic is the same way. There's some
Yeah.
sounds that come from the back of the throat. I didn't learn that when I was young, and so I can't do those kinds of sounds. The the Cyrillic language has some sounds that are kind of a, I'll call it a sloppy S, where it almost
Mm-hmm.
sounds kind of liquidy, and it sounds cool, but it's I don't do those because I didn't learn it. You
Yeah.
look at a lot of Filipinos, especially provincial Filipinos, have even a bigger leg up than others because they may have learned, Batagueno or Pampangan, and then
Mm.
they learned Filipino. Then they learned English. And so by the time they're out as teenagers, they know three different languages at various degrees. What
Yeah.
that does is it improves what I'll call the wiring in the brain
Mm.
to where you're able to understand complexity. You're able to understand ideas and how things work because you've learned, well, in this language I speak, the grammar is this way and that it's this way, it's that, it's this other way. Um, I remember coming back to the U.S. from a work trip that I did to Moscow, Russia. And the flight was a big plane because it was normally crowded. For some reason, I was blessed that it wasn't crowded. I was sitting. You had what, two seats, six seats, and then two seats, and I was in the middle set of six, and had nobody else with me. The family that was right in front of me was a mother and a father, and then
Mhm.
a young, probably 5 or 6 years old child. And I was fascinated because the child, mom sat at one end, dad sat at the other, and the child just kind of ran between them, and that was very cool. He was well behaved. When he would speak to mother, it would be in Russian. When it was father, he would speak in English. And I thought,
Mm.
holy cow, here this child is
Adapted. Adapted to
is
both.
adapted to both and speaks both for a 5 or 6 year old perfectly. I was like,
Yeah.
how can that be? Well, because that's the way he was raised, and many Filipinos are that way.
Mm.
That's going to give the Philippines, in my view, an edge as we move forward in this contact center arena. And I think the contact centers are, pardon me while I recharge here, the contact centers, I think, are going to need people who are fluent in multiple languages.
Right.
And I think the Philippines has that capacity already built into us. For example, a large percentage of the population, or a decent sized percentage of the population, is very familiar with Arabic because that's how they pray, that's the books that they read, and so on. So they're familiar with the sounds. They may they may not be able to carry on a conversation in Arabic, I don't know, or modern, especially modern Arabic, but at least the way that the tongue and the throat put sounds together to communicate, they're very familiar with. So it'd be just a matter of a little bit of training and bringing them up to date. In the same way, the uh, we have a relatively large percentage of the population that has lived in Europe. They know French, they know Spanish, they know whatever, Italian. We know we have a large percentage of the population that has done work in Japan. So they're
Mm.
very comfortable with the sounds of the Japanese language. I think these are things that, as we move forward, if they can figure out a way to use AI to boost and bolster this strength of the languages. For
Yeah.
example, we could have um, a voice recognition or a monitoring on our conversation. Let's say, for example, I'm comfortable in, I'm just using this as an example. I'm not comfortable in Japanese, but if I was, and you were Japanese, you're a client that calls in, even on a help desk, you would have already been presented with a number of questions and so on that are routine help desk issues.
Mm.
And hopefully you would have been assisted in that, in Japanese language,
In the Japanese
that
language. Yeah.
in the Japanese language. And then when, we could even use whether it's a male voice, female voice, or whatever, it wouldn't be written questions on your screen. You would have been talking to a voice that would have tried to answer you and helped you out at all. Um, for example, I learned the other day that like 90%, 90% of most help desk questions are forgotten passwords and resetting of passwords. Well, seriously, we're going to pay somebody good money as a computer engineer or somebody like that to reset a password that takes just a couple of keystrokes? Really, we're going to do that? That's an inefficient and ineffective use of our time and our money on wages. Let's get those people answering like real problems. So an AI, oh, I forgot my password. Can you reset it? Okay, a couple of questions to make sure that this is actually the person that you're talking to. We've done voice recognition so that we're relatively confident that the person who was calling in is actually the person that set up
Who they
the
claim.
account.
Mm.
And bada boom, bada bing, we send them the new link and they've got their password set. No human intervention. And, it saves people to be able to focus on real issues, real problems. And
Yeah.
that I think is the value of AI coming up. So now
Mm-hmm.
what we can do is, let's say, for example, after you've talked to the voice for a couple of minutes and they find out that uh, the issue that you've got is a little more complex than just their script, they'll say, could you, in Japanese, would you please wait? I'll let you talk to my supervisor. That's
Mm-hmm.
when I come on, and now my mind and the spirit can actually talk to you in Japanese or Arabic or Korean, whatever language we need to. And I've got a screen in front of me where it's still listening to you. And so now it's starting to hear what you're describing as the problem, and it's giving me some prompts so that I don't forget, oh, well, what he's actually asking about is this, and it could be this. Could be something as simply as rebooting your machine, or it could be, well, dude, you've got a real problem here. This indicates that you've been taken over by uh,
By a
one
bot.
of the botnet kind of things, and you're actually part of a big criminal conspiracy that's going on. This is how we need to correct this, and get you off of that
I was
robotic
curious,
network.
Stephen, now that you're
Sure.
now talking about bots, because you're certainly in the cyber security space. How does now with this AI thing becoming more mainstream, what are your feelings about how this will affect the practice of cybersecurity in companies and I guess day-to-day people? Like how should they be changing behaviors? I remember during our FCC meetup, you mentioned about behaviors as well. So just thinking out loud.
Well, I think one of the things that the AI does from a negative perspective, it allows one of the reasons, let me back up. One of the reasons why we're seeing so many computer crimes these days, and
Mm,
we used to have actually so many of them came out of Nigeria. They called them Nigerian scams, uh, but it's gone global now, where we receive letters or it used to be phone calls and things saying, "Oh, well, I'm a prince from such and such a place," and I personally have read the news, so I know that that's a tough place. It's chaotic. So somebody writes to me and says, I am a prince from that area.
mm.
I don't really know that much about the area, so I kind of buy into it. And I've been exiled, or I had to run for my life in the middle of the night.
There's a
But I've
box
got,
of gold somewhere, and
yeah,
you
there's
can
a
help me
box of
pick it up.
gold, or there's atomic materials, or there is $1 million in my bank. I need a bank outside of this country so that I can move that money into it. Give me your data so I can do this. And it used to be that somebody would have to write that letter, type it, print it, and then put it in an envelope, put postage on it, and send it through the mail.
Mm.
And that took a lot of time, and frankly, it took a lot of money because of postage and everything else. So the return on investment just wasn't really there. Uh,
Mhm.
they had to have kind of a lot of seed money to start a scam like that.
Yeah.
These days, though, I can send out email to millions of people with a marginal cost of, a point, a bunch of zeros, and then a one. The marginal cost is like next to nothing for these emails that I send out. That's the reason why we're seeing so many of them. The return on investment, if they get just one person that they can scam, that's paid off all of their investment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this idea of these electronic scams now, the phishing emails, and which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes, and the other emails, I think AI is going to make that somewhat. Um, it's going to make that stronger because the AI will think of ways to write new letters which are more comfortable to the victims, and
Hmm.
so the scams will be more difficult to detect.
Yeah.
I think the uh, scams will be a little bit higher order. That's where AI can come in on our side, though,
To help us.
from and it can actually help us look through these things. I've got on my Gmail account. I was just asked the other day, would you like us to help you, weed out the phishing?
Mm.
Uh, and I haven't made a decision on it yet. That pops up every day. I log into Gmail now, so I'm going to have to take a look at it. Well, just what do you do? Are you looking at emails that have a lot of uh, addresses in the BCC, the blind copy
Mm.
area? Are you looking at, what are the parameters that they're looking at so that they don't even accept an email into my account? They label it as phishing, or will they move that and kind of flag it and say this is, this has some markers of danger? I'm not quite sure what Gmail is going to do, but I think that's probably an AI program that's already looking at my emails to see what needs, if there are markers or indicators of danger.
Yeah.
And I haven't decided whether, how comfortable I am with that yet. I like the idea. And I also have to kind of come to an acceptance that Google and all of these services are already doing this.
Mm.
Um, but are they admitting it to me? Or is it transparent? And I think Google, Facebook, and the rest, they have not yet gotten to a point of comfort either with how transparent they need to be. Just tell me that you're doing it,
Yeah.
and tell me what you're doing to my account and my personal information. I'm confident that you and your listeners have had the experience that I'm talking about something with somebody, and a couple of days later, I'm starting to get a lot of emails on that
Hmm.
topic,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like,
It's a very
wait a minute,
one-sided relationship, you think, between
and
AI, no, rather between these big platforms and us. They're just getting all our data and we're getting nothing back.
well, and I think that's the problem, and they're also not being very transparent about this, and this is
Hmm.
where I think it upsets a lot of people, and we're having to work our way through it. As more people express their displeasure, it's not getting off of Twitter or
Mm.
X, whatever it's called now. It's not getting off of Facebook, although that's not necessarily a bad idea, but it also cuts you off from a lot of possibilities and potential. Um, you know, I'm not interested in a job right now, in a new job. I'm very happy with the job that I've got. But I was talking with a friend of mine, and he indicated that he was looking for a new job, or he would like to explore new jobs.
Yeah.
So I get onto LinkedIn and I look under the jobs category just to see if there's anything there that I can say, hey, well, did you see this? Did you see this? Now I'm starting to get, people think that it's, or not people, the AI think that it's me that's looking for the job. So I'm starting to get all sorts of different emails and things. It's reasonable for them to assume that. And then I have to have the patience and the presence of mind to say, okay, what I did was I triggered the AI, and the a lot of people will call it the algorithm with the AI. And I'm okay with that because now it gives me some things that maybe I didn't know about, and I'm able to tell my friend, hey, here's some other jobs that you might want to take a look at and see what happens with it. I think what the big companies and what all of us need to do is look at these potentials with the AI, what it could do, and just make sure that we are open and transparent about what we're doing with things, which, by the way, is basically what the Philippine Data Privacy Act requires us to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that we can't use data that's given to us. What it says is that you have to make sure that the person knows what's going to be done.
Yeah.
We have to disclose it. And as long as we're thinking about that and in our project planning, we spoke about marketing earlier. I think the AI will actually open up some very, very interesting fields in marketing and sales. But as you're developing the software, hardware, and uh, other ware that goes into this program, the wetware or the people that are behind it need to be programmed also to think about how are people going to react to this. And it's not a matter of trying to hide things or be disingenuous or play word games, but it's to be how to be open. And that's where I think the AI will help us to be even more competitive and build better businesses. Uh, and I think that those people who handle AI wisely will actually make better businesses in the future than those who don't embrace AI and who don't do it fully, because you're going to cut yourself off from a lot of potential clients and a lot of potential business. One of the things that I've gotten into over the last few years is risk and risk management. And a lot of us think about risk and risk management as, oh, well, what are the risks we face? Oh, we might have a hurricane or a typhoon. We might have an earthquake. We might have, building collapse or whatever. Those are certainly issues. But the way I have come to work with the company that I'm with right now is when we look at risks, always put a parenthesis behind risk as opportunity, because with risks come greater opportunities, and with greater opportunities come risk of some fashion.
Yeah.
Risk is a way of looking at what are the upsides, what are the downsides to a particular course of action.
Like a risk assessment of some sort.
That is critical to every project that we're coming up with, is to look at with an unemotional, open mind about what are the upsides to this particular course of action. What are the potential downsides to this particular course of action? Where are we going to gather data? What do we have to do to protect that data and make sure that we can use it? Do we have to anonymize it, make it so that it's not identifiable with any particular person? I can still know your age, gender, but as long as I can't take that age and gender and identify it as, Doc or Steve or anybody else, then it's okay for me to collect that data and use it. It's where it becomes personal identifying information that's going to be the real issue. Even sensitive information, um, whether I'm LGBTQ, whether I am Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, or whatever, that's very sensitive information. I can still anonymize that in certain ways where I cannot then take it and identify a certain individual. But if I know that my product is particularly attractive to Muslims, well, now I've got a real marketing opportunity, but I may want to use different words or word context. I may want to use different pictures in my advertising and visual in my advertising than I would do if I was trying to reach a different demographic. And so I've got some really interesting opportunities that the AI can help me do
Hmm.
and achieve. And that's where I think we've got some really, that again is where the critical thinking comes in, because a human is going to have to look at, well, what that's really sensitive. That's going to be what we'll call a trigger.
Yeah.
That maybe I want to. I'll back up just a wee little bit from the public health arena as well. How do we target? And I think the COVID vaccines, and then the follow-on. There was a disease that came up uh, 6 months to a year ago called monkeypox, and
Monkeypox.
that, as it turns out, monkeypox had a particular population in which it was flourishing,
Hmm.
but it was not getting out into the general population. And we see COVID kind of the same way. There were massive lockdowns, massive inoculation programs or vaccination programs. Now that everything is kind of calmed down, we see that perhaps if we had what I will call sliced and diced the information available better, and AI probably could have helped us do that. Maybe we could have targeted the vaccinations and the sequestering. I won't call it lockdown for a particular population. As it is, because we didn't know, and we were concerned about other issues, we had to do massive lockdown rather than sequestering certain aspects of the population and just say, look, you're at high risk. Don't travel. We're not going to allow you to travel. Pardon me, because you are at high risk. We're not, we're going to discourage you from going out. In fact, you're not allowed to go out. We will sequester you and not allow you to get into to go out and about at all. Uh,
Yeah,
we
I
could
think
look at.
if
Go
I
ahead.
can thinking out loud, this comes at an interesting time because obviously we just get out of a 3 year basically social experiment with
Yeah.
COVID, and then now we're back up and around, and society's I think still grappling with kind of the trauma of those 3 years, and then now we have a new force that's potentially causing another trauma, which is AI. I'm just wondering out loud how we can cope with these changes. Obviously, not everybody will find it difficult. There will be people who will actually find it easier, adapting to these new trends. I imagine young people, this will be quite natural to them. Most of them already rely on AI in various,
Hmm.
aspects. Like I remember we were doing a workshop on design thinking, and one of the last activities is to create a slide deck, so you can present your stuff. And I remember because the audience was mostly, well, for that workshop was mostly young Gen Z graduating students. And I provided everyone a template that I used, which is a PowerPoint template. And I remember, I think none, with the exception of one, none of them used the template because they were more used to put this new software called Canva, which already
Yeah.
had
Right.
AI built into it.
Yep.
And obviously their output was much better than what I could come up with my humble, trusty little PowerPoint. But that, that just tells me that there's a generation gap now between people who are native. Before we used to call it digital natives. I think we are on the cusp of having AI native people, as opposed to the rest of us who kind of have to be digital or AI migrants. You can call it that.
Well, I think it's interesting. You raise an excellent point. Um, and your use of the words Gen Z and millennials and so on, I think is important just to help us make a point. But what I'm seeing to take off on that, use that as the foundation to take off. You raised another fascinating point, which is that those who can adapt to what's coming will be the ones who succeed. And what's interesting out of that is that it's not age related. The Gen Z may have, well, I spoke about the Filipinos having kind of a leg up on North Americans because of their language facility from a very young age. Well, so I think the Gen Z and then whatever else has come along will be younger when they develop this facility. But whether it is um, Gen Z, millennials, or people from 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, and then above, can still learn these things if they want to. And I think that says something for the Philippines also. And actually, now that I'm thinking about the demographics, this is where I think the Philippines also will excel, um, because we see a lot of countries. Are you familiar with the term a demographic window?
Vaguely, yeah, maybe
Okay,
explain it a
vaguely. Well,
bit.
that's okay because I'll go ahead and explain it. Right now, the Filipino demographic window is open. Places like China, places like Japan, their windows are either closing or are closed. And the demographic window is that period of time in a nation's history where the majority of the population is of working age. And the Philippines just entered that and will be in it for that window just open. So we had a lot of people in the working age. Um, we always have. But right now, we have a very young population. And so our demographic window in the Philippines will be open for the next 50 years. And then our population that we have now will be, 70 years old and theoretically retiring and so on. So I think we're entering a phase where our population is hugely work oriented. And so we've got to come up with a lot of jobs for these young people. And because of the AI, because of the electronics, we no longer really have to ship people overseas to become overseas or OFWs, the overseas workers, kind of like we might export a sack of rice, we export people. No, we don't have to do that anymore because we can work electronically. In the old days, you had to be on site in the traditional manufacturing, seafarers, construction jobs, and those jobs will still be available to huge numbers of Filipinos. Also, those that don't feel comfortable in the electronic world will still be able to find a lot of jobs and work as and make really good money, by the way, as plumbers, welders, glaziers, the people who fit glass, masons, and so on. Masons not in the organization, Masons in the people that work with stones and bricks. Because other countries, their workers are retiring and are at an age where they're not willing to do the hard manual labor of construction. And so our people will be able to fit into those. But even more importantly, we will be able to provide jobs and opportunities in good paying jobs electronically. And that's where, like the IT industry, the Business Processing Association of the Philippines and the Contact Center Association of the Philippines has set out a roadmap for, I think their goal year is 2028, to vastly improve the number of, or raise the number of jobs, like by 1 million, uh, almost double their workforce now, and the percentage of GDP, the gross domestic product, the economic value of the nation, is going to be vastly increased. And I think the generation that we're having graduating over the last couple of years and graduating in the future, as these folks come into the workplace, and those people who are 25, 30, 40 years old now become more familiar with AI and other electronic means of communication and assisted communication, we're going to actually make ourselves vastly more important to the world than we've been so far. And Doc, there's an important point when we talk about the augmented intelligence and the electronic world. In the old days, it was what's called a zero-sum game. In order for you to gain, I had to lose. In order for me to gain, you had to lose or give up something. In order for us to have a physical wealth, say, for example, gold, there's only so much gold. Well, I can get an ounce of gold or a kilo of gold. That means you can't. You can't have that same gold. Information, though, is what has been referred to as the new oil or the new gold. And this is even more valuable because in the same terabyte of information, both of us can own that terabyte of information. Both of us can slice and dice and work with that information to improve our own economic welfare, unlike gold, physical gold, where I got it or you got it. But that same terabyte of information can now be owned by both of us and make both of us rich. And that win-win, getting rid of a zero-sum game, although we still have it, we still have to be used to it because of oil and gold and things like that. We still need physical and land. Nobody's making more land. There's only so much land out there. But information is vastly different. And that's where this idea of getting our people, I started to say our youth, but I want to go to the bigger picture of all of our people, re-skilled and upskilled through online classes, Coursera and other classes that we can take, short-term webinars that you put on. You're working with people. We spoke earlier about you doing a 3-day conference or a 3-day workshop. I think those kinds of educational opportunities are going to be even more important in the future than me going to a traditional school and earning a master's degree. I actually see the traditional school system that we're still going to need a very solid, what I'll call the DEP Ed school, incredibly solid. Those need to be really, really boosted. But the CHED type schools, I think their end product of a degree, thinking that's going to make you rich, that's going to start taking a lesser place in society. And the webinars and seminars, workshops, and so on are going to be much more important, especially for those who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And I think that's where it also offers an interesting opportunity for people at the older end of the age spectrum to still be really, really productive in society in a working environment. I think no longer can we say, well, somebody's 55 or 57, 65, we have to force them to retire. It's nice if they do want to retire, if they want to start living those years doing new things. God bless them, good for them. But I don't think we are in a position where we ought to force their retirement. We can upskill many of those people and reskill many of those people to keep their productive years going basically until death if they want to. And I think this opportunity going forward is huge, and I'm very, very excited about it. If you can't tell,
Yeah, I mean that's really a good. Maybe we'll tackle it in our next conversation. I just
I'd love
realized,
to.
you know, there goes the hour. We talked about a
Yeah,
lot
there
of
we are,
things.
isn't it?
So I don't know. Maybe can you give a few closing words, and then we'll wrap it up, and then we'll try to boot up another chat very very soon. So any final thoughts you want to send, or
Yeah, the
temporarily
thing that
final
I
thoughts?
yeah, the thing that I'd like to emphasize with AI is it's something to be careful with and attentive to and intentional about. We have to think, um, but it's not something to be afraid of. It's something to be aware of and focused on, and how we're going to use it. Just begin to learn if you're not already familiar with it, comfortable with it. I mean,
Yeah.
every day I'm trying to learn new things about it, Doc. I'm sure you are too. How is this going to be used and what does that mean for us? And then do your risk assessments. What are the upsides to this, the opportunities that this allows us to do? And I think you're going to find, we're going to find as a society and as individuals, it really brings a lot to the table for us if we're careful about
All right. Thanks a lot, Steve Cutler, and looking forward to having you again on another chat.
it. I look forward to it. This was good. It went by like we were just a couple of minutes ago. This was great
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So thanks for the call. We'll chat with you again soon, and thank you.
Okay.